Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining another Office Hours with Billy. Today we'll be talking about preventing runouts. It's just 2 o'clock right now. I see there are some people that are still getting connected, logging in and dialing in. So we're going to wait just a few moments here, and then we'll go ahead and dive into our topic for today. Thank you. All right, everybody. It looks like most of our people have signed in. I'm not seeing the names coming through, but we'll go ahead and start off with introductions here, just in case there's a couple more people that are getting logged in. So again, welcome to Office Hours with Billy. We host these every month, usually in spring, summer, and early fall, before things get too busy for you guys. It hasn't been too long since our last meeting, but we wanted to get this new topic out to you because there's a lot of requests for it, talking about preventing runouts. So that's going to be our goal for today, talking about the different things that we can do to prevent runouts as much as possible. A couple of notes about today. If there are any questions that you have as we're going through, please feel free to use the questions box. When you use that, I'll be able to see any of the questions that come through. I will be waiting until the end of the presentation to answer questions. And if for some reason I can't get to your question, I'll make sure that we follow up with you after the presentation. So if I don't mention your question on the call, please note I'm not ignoring you. There's a couple of reasons why we might not be able to answer that. Sometimes especially when we're talking about preventing runouts, it's very setup intensive, and answering some questions might actually require a more a closer look at your particular setup, which obviously probably the webinar is not the best place to do that. We are recording for today, so we'll make sure participants get a recording. And I also ask that after the presentation, we usually send out either a survey or a follow-up email if there are topics that you'd like to have us cover for future office hours events. We'd love to know what's on your mind, what you'd like us to do. So please send over your topics so that we can help schedule future office hours events. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about preventing runouts. So first and foremost, I want to just introduce myself. I've been with Cargus for about 5 years now. My name is Billy Ward. I am a systems consultant. I've done so many of these meetings, I was kind of sick and tired of the same picture of me showing up anywhere. So I ripped this one off of my social media. But I have been with Cargus for about 5 years. I've been in the consulting role. So I'm looking forward to helping out with our topic for today. Now, you guys aren't here to stare at my cool profile picture. Our goal today is talking about runouts and how to avoid them. When I was preparing for today's meeting and trying to figure out what's the best way to tackle this topic, it really comes down to going back to basics. Going back to the basics of looking at our setup and what setup affects automatic pulls and automatic projections. Looking at how we're setting up our customers to make sure that we're doing the best that we possibly can when we're setting up an automatic customer. I want to talk about delivery pull best practices. If we look at some of the ways that we're doing delivery pulls, there could potentially be room for improvement in making sure that we're actually gathering all the tickets that we need to be gathering in order to prevent a run out. We'll look at some things in the delivery center, look at our my at-risk settings primarily to make sure that we're using that to the best of our ability. And there's always the K-factor exception report. A lot of times this kind of gets forgotten about over a summer or two when we don't have too many automatic deliveries, but it's definitely worth its weight in gold and then some to evaluate customers' deliveries that may have fallen into a run-out situation. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and dive into our example site here. So we're going to start by looking at setup and the setup pieces that affect our automatic deliveries. So if I go to admin setup, I'm going to go down to just looking at the delivery section. So I'm going to do setup type delivery, And there are a few things at play here when it comes to projecting for our automatic deliveries. First and foremost, we're going to be looking at what our degree day tables are. So if I dive into this setup for degree day tables, this is where you set up your degree day table. So depending on your region and where you live and the customers you serve, you may need multiple degree day tables. My rule of thumb is usually if you're going to have areas that could potentially have more than a 10-degree swing between the two different areas, might as well get a degree day table set up for those areas and just be as precise as possible. So for example, if you serve an area where you might have a lot of houses along the shore, a lot of residential heating places, in spring and fall, they could be pretty cold at night compared to more inland, things aren't quite as cold. Or maybe you have a mountain region, a higher elevation, and a valley area that's a lower elevation, and those temperatures are different. Those could potentially be great areas for a degree day table. So when we're looking at the degree day table, you want to look at the regions here and choose an address within that area that could best represent where you want to pull those degree days from. Our system is set up to automatically import degree days. You don't have to do that if you do prefer to continue to manually import or manually update degree days. You don't have to use the import, but it is helpful. It can save yourself some time there. So I'm going to edit one of these and let this load here. So we're going to plug in, if you add in that degree day table, give it a name, activate your degree day import if you'd like, use your location address, and then the base temperature is 65. So we usually say 65 is your base temperature for calculating degree days. So if the average temperature for a day dips below 65, that's when we're going to start calculating degree days. Now, some customers I've worked with have customers with alternative heating sources, so kind of heat pump type situations. I have seen them use separate degree day tables for those customers that maybe their heat doesn't kick in into a much lower temperature, so we're not calculating as much usage. That is something you can do. I definitely recommend reaching out via support ticket if you choose to set that up, just so we can give you all the considerations for that. Because we want to make sure that since degree day tables get assigned to locations, that we're assigning a heat pump type degree day table to the correct locations so that they can calculate more accurately. Going back to our setup list, the next thing I want to look at is the season master. So if I edit the season master, this is something that you can set per region, per degree day table. You would select the degree day table, and you can choose when each particular season starts. So if you're in a colder area, you may want to have a longer winter period. If you're in a warmer area, you might want to have a shorter winter period. When we're setting up our automatic tanks, we'll have a K factor for all 4 seasons and a base load for all 4 seasons. The K factor can, sometimes we shut off automatic calculations for summer for existence. So we set a summer K factor to 0. Well, that's great, but we want to make sure that these dates for the summer master, the season master for summer are correct. Otherwise, you're missing out on calculations for particular seasons. With our degree day table and our season master in place, degree days are imported into the degree day tables and averages are figured out to help with projections. One other thing I like to point out, if you're working with adding in a lot of new customers it can be helpful to use the forecast type K-factor defaults. So if I edit into that real quick, this is something you can do. You don't have to do it for every forecast type, but you can, for instance, create a default for heat and hot water to plug in. And this would come in handy if a customer is setting up a new account and we're setting them up as automatic, but your customer might not have as much information about how much their usage is. Maybe they're not, really the type of people that track that. This gives us a jumping off point that we can start and say, well, we know you're using it for heat and hot water. Let's go ahead and use our defaults and then just kind of monitor your tank. And as deliveries are being made, we make sure we're checking out the K-factor exception report for your tank. So set them up for as many forecast types as it makes sense for your particular business, because that can be a good safety net if you're working with a customer that's not quite as savvy as to how much their usage is. Maybe they just moved into the house, or they're kind of new to being on their own for the first time. Now there's one setting I want to look at. It's actually under the company setting, and it comes into play with the automatic updates that Cargus is allowed to do to your K-factors and when it can do it. So I'm just going to move this to view all of our setup items. And we're going to look at the company setup. A lot of times, this is something that's set up at Go Live and maybe never revisited. So if we scroll down, we have the forecasting section here. So there's a couple of things at play. This is where you can turn on or off the auto adjustment of K-factors. We usually recommend allow Cargus to auto adjust K-factors, but put a limit as to how much Cargus can make a change. By default, Cargus is going to be set to auto adjust K-factors and will allow an increase of up to 5% or a decrease of up to 20%. We don't necessarily want Cargus to do a complete override every single time you make a delivery. We do want a little bit of observation into that, and that's where that K-factor exception report will come into place. One setting that I find gets forgotten from time to time is this update K only in winter. Update winter K only in winter. Essentially, this exists for users who prefer to have some more manual overrides and more manual intervention when it comes to updating the winter K-factor, especially if there is a delivery that kind of crosses over seasons. So if a customer's last delivery was in fall and their next delivery was in winter, since that delivery took place but didn't happen entirely in the winter period, the system isn't going to auto update the winter K-factor for that particular delivery. I would say 9 times out of 10, make sure this setting is turned off. I would even say 9.5 times out of 10, make sure this setting is turned off. Because if there's going to be usage in winter between deliveries, you're going to want Cargus to kind of calculate and update that winter K-factor because there was some usage in winter. And when we look at our K-factor exception report, you can always make additional updates to the changes that Cargus made. So definitely recommend coming to your setup and checking out your season master, your degree day tables, and probably most importantly, making sure that winter K only in winter is turned off, unless you really do want to be more manual when you're looking at deliveries that cross over seasons. With our setup pieces in place, I'm going to go to a customer's account and I'll open up their account and just talk about creating an automatic tank. So we're going to go to setup and tank, and I'm going to choose automatic. Now, a lot of this is just putting in basic information, just like we would with any other tank that we're making. I'm going to kind of just jump through here. So we have our basic tank information. I'm going to press next, and this is where the automatic situation comes into play. So if you're working with a customer who is becoming automatic, the most important thing is to start out with their forecast type. What are they using the tank for? Now, specific functionality really isn't tied into these forecasting types, but they are important to when you're evaluating a tank. So if 10 years from now, you come in and look at my account and check out the tank, you'll be able to see what it's used for. It also helps out if you're evaluating a tank and you notice a lot of, maybe there is some summer usage, but it's set up for heat only, you know there's a setup problem that needs to be cleaned up. So for example, let's say I'm here and as a customer, I say I'm using my tank for heat and hot water. I'm going to select that. Now you can see my defaults have populated. So if I was a customer that had no idea what was going on, and I wasn't really sure of my annual usage, I can just use my ups and kind of get a feel for when my next delivery is going to be. If I was a little more savvy, I could say, you know, I use about 1,500 gallons a year. You can plug in that 1,500 gallons here and calculate out the K factors to adjust for that usage and become a little more precise. Now you can see here, I don't have any summer usage selected. Perhaps there's very, very few degree days, if any, that ever pass by that would in this particular area. You can leave that as is. Now, if you do live in an area where it could still get cold at night, in the north, up in the mountains, you'd want to make sure that you still have some sort of a K factor in there, even if it's a little higher. Maybe people don't always turn their heat, they kind of grin and bear it, but in most situations, a lot of people can turn off summer K factors. You kind of have to have a sense of a feel, you know, obviously for your area and the weather, and if there is the occasional summer usage, go ahead and plug something in there. The next piece is going to be filling in the previous full delivery date. So if they know the last time they had a full delivery, or if they know how much is in the tank, either by gallons or by percent full, they can put that information in, and Cargus will use this to project when their next delivery is going to be. So if I'm a customer and I say, you know I have, 700 gallons in there, and I press save, Cargus is going to look at my amounts in here. Now you can make changes to that. So if you're talking with a customer and you're, you made a mistake, you need to go back, something doesn't look right, you can always come back here and say gallons in tank or percent full. And I forgot to look at what this tank size is. I think I had a 500 gallon tank in here. So let's use this. Let's say I'm actually at 25%. I press save. Yeah, 500. I tried to put too many gallons in the tank. That's why that didn't work out. I've got 100 gallons in the tank. So that means with 100 gallons, I have my optimal tank size here at 250. This is going to trigger a ticket pretty soon. I usually recommend after you create an automatic tank, you're going to just evaluate these numbers with the customer. You can say, kind of get a feel for the gallons in tank and when our next deliveries are going to be, so that the customer kind of is approving these dates. Now the customer were to say, it sounds like I don't know too much of what's going on, but I feel like I should be getting a delivery sooner, or you're coming too soon, or something like that. Just go back in, reconfigure your automatics, your K factors, so that you can kind of adjust these numbers that are more in line with what the customer is kind of anticipating. As little things are falling into place here, the next step is really going to be looking at our delivery pulls. And I will say in many cases, delivery pulls, there are some tools in place that if you're using the degree day import are going to be very helpful. This is what I recommend. Under the delivery menu, go to your pull screen, right click and just open that link in a new tab. With this in a new tab, I want to talk about the specific pieces of information that are on here when we're looking specifically at automatic deliveries. So when we're talking about our delivery date and our degree date ranges that we're looking for, this is actually looking at two different pieces of information in the system. A lot of times, in many cases, users will get attached to just doing one or the other, but my recommendation is to use both. Especially in wintertime, you can't avoid it. You must use both, especially in the heating season. The reason why is this next delivery date max is actually looking at a customer's base load usage. The degree day max is looking at the customer's K-factor usage. So if I were only to put in a next delivery date max, but I didn't put anything under degree day max, I am only going to pull up a customer if they have a base load. So I could potentially be losing out on a customer that needs a delivery that doesn't have a base load. If they're K-factor only, if they're heat only, I might be missing those customers. The opposite is also true, that if I only put in a degree day max and I didn't put anything in a next delivery date max, then I'm going to be losing out on customers that could potentially just have a base load, or customers that have a base load that's going to have them trigger a delivery sooner than the degree day. Using both of these fields is going to help and make sure that you're getting the deliveries that need to take place. Basically, it'll look at an account, it'll look at a tank and say, based on the numbers that I have in next delivery date max and next degree date max, whatever I have entered in there, whatever would trigger a ticket first will help create a ticket. Again, as a reminder, unless you're looking for something very specific, if you're trying to track down a specific ticket, we recommend leaving your delivery date minimums and your degree date minimums blank in case somebody accidentally deleted a past dated ticket or something got missed in a previous pull, that you'd be scooping that one up into this pull as well. As far as filter goes, again, if you leave everything as is, you're kind of scooping everything up. However, if you're looking for something specific, you can put additional filters on. Deliveries are pulled by degree day table. So if you're doing multiple degree day tables, you'll have to do a pull per degree day table. One thing that's helpful is when you're determining what deliveries to pull and how far out to pull, I like to go back to my original tab that I had open, go under the delivery menu to my degree day table and open up my degree days. Using the import, what the system does is it puts in a degree day projection for the next week. So what I'm seeing here is I'm seeing our current degree days up through the current day. This is my degree day running total. When it comes time for me to do a pull, I can use my projected degree day running total to help get a more accurate pull. So if I'm going through here and I'm looking at, let's say I want to pull my deliveries through the 12th. I can come here to my projected degree day table and I can look at this number and I can just copy and paste this number into my pool for degree day max. If you want to have a few extra deliveries, let's say I'm just going to do through the 13th, so I have a little bit of a buffer there. In case I have a few small routes, I can go ahead and start plugging in some deliveries that would come due through the 13th. Again, just copy, right-click, copy, right-click, paste. That's going to get all my K factors and heating usage. And then I can tell Cargus I'm pulling deliveries through the 13th for base loads, and that will generate tickets both based on base loads and K factors, and make sure we're not missing out on anybody. You can include scheduled if you want. Go ahead, click go, and do your pull and get those tickets out into the delivery center. So these projections can be very helpful. You can view both here for your different regions. It will show you each. So use this number, kind of helps give you a little bit of a buffer. You know, some of the old ways, you know, we would just assume there would be X number of degree days that it will be coming by, just kind of going on a gut feel. This kind of helps to make sure maybe your gut feel is correct, or maybe we're anticipating colder or warmer weather than average. This helps kind of evaluate where we're going to be at that point in time. My next stop on this journey is going to be under the delivery center. So I'm going to go to the delivery center. So when we're looking at determining what tickets to route, Cargus will apply a run out date to the automatic tanks. So we know we're creating these automatic deliveries based on their K factor or base load. So there kind of becomes a due date of a day before the run out date. This My At Risk setting can really help you find the tickets that are going to be at risk for a run out based on those calculations. We really recommend setting up your My At Risk settings so that it's meaningful to you, so each individual user can set their own at-risk settings. Definitely go in here, review those at-risk settings, and make sure that your tickets are being marked at risk if they're meant to be marked at risk. So depending on, you know, how far in advance you'd like to see a will call ticket, or excuse me, an automatic ticket as a risk for a run out, you would put that number in here so that Cargus can identify it, mark it as at risk. When a ticket's marked at risk, there's a couple of things that come into play here. On the at-risk tickets, you'll be able to see that information in here. You'll be able to see any of your automatics that are being marked at risk, along with their estimated delivery date, which is going to be 1 day before their run out. You can see we're working in a test site that we don't update too much, but the most important thing is, as long as your at-risk settings under your home screen are accurate to how you route, you're going to be in a much better place for identifying tickets that we really need to put as a priority, as opposed to tickets where we have a little more leeway on. The other thing that happens is on your route, if I were to create a new route, you can actually hit actions and add tickets, and you can put on your filters as usual, but you can also say, show me my at-risk tickets only. I'm going to remove all my other filters here and get tickets. I'll plot my at-risk tickets kind of all over the place here. We'll zoom in. As we're looking at tickets on the map, you can see here's one that's not in a cluster. That ticket is going to be marked as red. So that is my at-risk tickets. So if I were to have done this without the filter of at risk only, and I viewed all of the tickets that I currently have in the system, you would have potentially different colors for automatic and will call and so on and so forth. But anything at red is going to be included as an at risk ticket. So that can really help if we were to come back here. I'm going to add in all our tickets. We can see if we have any right here in middle of North Carolina. We have a will call ticket. So if I had multiple tickets on this map, I would be able to determine what is a higher priority because it's at risk and use my lasso tool to scoop that up. The last thing I want to talk about is our K-factor exception report. So I have it up here. I had to do some searching for dates in our consulting site since it's not an active site. But you can find the K-factor exception report under the reports, delivery, K-factor exceptions. I recommend running this report at least once a week. If you're having a very busy winter, you might want to do it a couple times a week just to make sure that you're staying on top of it and it doesn't become too burdensome to review. What this report is going to show you is it's going to show deliveries that were a certain percent different from what the automatic calculations were. So in other words, if Cargus, based on the K factors and base loads, thought we were going to deliver 500 gallons, but we got there and delivered 10, Cargus is going to say, well, that's wrong, and recalculate those K factors within whatever limits we have set up on the company settings. This gives you a chance to review those deliveries and make additional changes to the K factors and base loads if you feel it's necessary. I also find what ends up happening is if a driver goes to a customer's location and they forget to hit partial fill, so if they did a delivery, they maybe they run out of fuel on their truck or something like that, and they couldn't complete a full delivery, and they left at that point in time. If they didn't mark partial fill, Cargus is going to think that that delivery filled the tank, and this allows you to kind of catch some of that as you investigate what you're seeing on this report. And as you catch that, you'd be able to see, okay, so I can reverse any K factor changes that took place and update the tank to its correct quantity in tank. So how to run this report is once you get to here from reports, delivery, K factor exceptions, you would put in your start and end date, and then you can put in a minimum differential. We default to 10. I usually say you can probably go up to about a 20% differential just to filter out some of the smaller differences in the report. But when in doubt, you can just stick with the defaults and then review deliveries. So we're going to see some wild numbers here because we're in a site that's basically a playground. But you can see on this report, it's going to go from extreme to extreme. It's going to start with deliveries that were far more than we anticipated and end with deliveries that were far less. As you get closer to the middle, there's probably less changes that you need to worry about. So what we're looking at here, we have the customer information, the percent difference from what was delivered between what was delivered and what we thought was going to be delivered, and then tank information. So here you can see there was a delivery. Cargus, based on K factors, thought we were only going to deliver 50 gallons, but we showed up and delivered 400. We were way off. Cargus did make some changes to the K factors and base loads. However, maybe I want to be more aggressive than the changes that Cargus made. I can select this tank just by pressing on the report line. It's going to bring me to the customer's account and into their tank, where I can hit actions, configure automatic, and review my K factors and base loads and make changes as I see fit. So coming through here, you can either use the expected annual usage to make some changes. You can play with the numbers. I always recommend, because math isn't my favorite thing in the world, as you make changes to your K factors and base loads, just evaluate what it's doing to the total number of gallons on this particular tank and make sure that usage per season makes sense and our grand total usage makes sense. Because if these numbers aren't logical to what a customer is using, then you know you're going to want to keep playing with those numbers until they are. So definitely run this report at least once a week, if not more, just to stay on top of it. As you're running through this report, if everything, once you're finished looking at a particular record, just mark it off that you've looked at it and check that off. The reason why is if you have to step away from this report and come back to it, and I rerun this report for the same date range, anything that's already been reviewed is going to be off of this report unless you choose this include previously reviewed option. So just as a review of everything we talked about, it's a very brief look into all the different pieces. There's no one silver bullet for everyone. Every company is going to be a little bit different. But the best thing to do is review setup, specifically your season master, your degree day tables, and your company setup. Review making sure we're setting up customers correctly to begin with and getting the information from the customer, reviewing those dates, looking at our delivery pool, making sure that we're doing our both degree day max and our next delivery date max, so we're not missing any tanks. And then reviewing my at-risk settings to make sure that we're flagging tickets before we even get them dispatched, make sure we're doing our priority tickets, and then evaluating the K-factor exception report at least once a week. When it's all said and done, of course, we are always going to be kind of beholden to your customer giving you correct information to begin with, but hopefully this can help evaluate and prevent a lot of the runouts. I'm going to turn it over to some questions, so bear with me one moment while I bring up the questions and review them. If you have questions, please fill in the question box on the webinar. Again, if there is something that might require more specific research into your specific company, I'm going to defer that to a support ticket. And if we can't get to all the questions, we'll make sure to follow up. All right. So we're looking at what is Cargiss's recommendation on handling 0-gallon deliveries? That's a great question. So when I run into this situation, my recommendation is when to, the question usually comes down to when do we use the actions and cancel delivery on a delivery ticket, or when do I create a 0-gallon delivery? If you get to the customer's location and the gate is locked, or there's a really scary dog running around the property and you can't access the tank, you're going to want to just cancel the delivery on the tablet and go, that unassigns it for routing on a future date. The other option is the 0-gallon delivery. So that's if you get there and the tank is what you consider full, so it's at 80%, doesn't need a delivery, you can go ahead and just engage the meter and then turn it off and do a 0-gallon delivery. Because what that will do is that tells Cargiss, well, we triggered our ticket and that tank was full, so we don't want to, it'll make an evaluation on the K-factors to be more accurate since we went there and we didn't need to make a delivery. So that's when that kind of comes into play. The next question is, should we change the estimated percentage before a delivery is made or wait until we review the K-factor exception report? I would say this, if you're looking at a customer's tank and you're looking at the override last full delivery date, if you know exactly how much is in that customer's tank and it is way off from what is being recorded here, go ahead and update that amount so it reprojects. However, if there's already a delivery created for the tank, it's going to show up on the K-factor exception report, and just make sure you're evaluating your K-factor exception report. But if for some reason you're talking with a customer and they mention, you know, they have 25% left in their tank, and I'm looking at this and I'm showing we're at 0, well, that's a good time to come in here and configure automatic and override my last full delivery date and tell Cargus, you know what, there's actually 25% left in that tank, and press save. Do base loads calculate by season? Yes. So base loads, they don't update quite as much because it's a little trickier to figure out base loads versus K factors. Base loads will update if there's like non-heating usage over periods where there's usage but not a lot of degree days passing by. It kind of uses that to judge for base loads for the rest of the season. So yes, base loads will update by season. They calculate by season. You can add and adjust base loads by season, and they do show up on the K-factor exception report if Cargus made any changes to those as well. I always use the example, let's say this is being used for heat and hot water. Spring, fall, and winter can be 0.6 because you know, maybe it's just 2 people that live in the house, but then over summer they have their grandkids come, and so it's more people in the house, more hot water is getting used, so we bump that up a little bit. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions, so we can wrap it up. I do want to say we have our next office hours already assigned. It's going to be on the collections assistant, and that's going to be June 24th at 2. There will be a link in the slides when you get the attachment for the slides. And please feel free to sign up for that. Look for this link in the Cargus announcements on your homepage. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for today. If you do have any specific questions to your company, please feel free to put in a support ticket. Our support team is happy to help. We can also refer you to our customer success team so that if there's additional consulting required, we can get you in touch with a consultant to do a deeper dig into your setup. So thank you all for attending today. Appreciate your time, your questions. It's been great, and we'll be talking soon. Thank you so much.